Hello and most welcome to 892. We are having a very lovely evening here. Still have some sun. And this would be 891, I figure. Or is it 92? Get a bit confused here, sorry. Let me check, give it a sec. $891 we're having. Sorry about the confusing. Today I will talk about the domination of the ego and its world. And this is a lot about ownership. Once we're talking about the subjective side, something that I personally felt to be very beneficial because it's such a subject that's been fairly untouched before. And this is also a very rewarding way of going about the matter. It goes directly, as they say in Spanish, al grano, to the grain. It is easier to understand this way too. This is what I feel personally. The ego is the possessor of the world. It takes everything for granted. And it's the very direction of dominating everything. For the ego, nothing can be what it says, undefined or unconquered. He or she has the whole world. And I think this is very similar to what Feyerabend calls the conquest of abundance. This is taking away everything that is interesting. Or to take a quote from Ian McGilchrist, when they took away the holiness of the churches, they declared every place to be a holy place of worship. They made holiness everywhere, and thereby they took holiness out of the world. I think that is something that is going to be a quote now when the book is getting more and more publicity thanks to the matter with things. The domination of the ego is a frozen piece of reality, of a still life, of something that was vivid and present before, and now has become less energized and still, whereas ego and, this is very important, ego and objects gets put in place just like two cogwheels. It must happen instantaneous. Compare a shift gear where the clutch opens the gears and then they fall in place. Once they're falling in place, force will be transmitted to the axles of the car and the wheels be turning. This is the very same. It is a completely simultaneous thing. Ego and objects turn into the world. It's very important. And I think we handle a lot about the objects and what they do, how they work, reductionism, representationalism, the idea of a word at large, and also a perspective from nowhere. And now we're looking at the other turn of this construction or thing or moment. It also has another substance or force, and this is lack of awareness. It is not made of regular stuff. It is made of unknowingness. Lack of any better word, this is the word I invented. Unknowingness. This is a weird spelling of my new word. It's a state of not knowing. And this not knowing is very, very specific. It's you just don't know about it. Like you have something in your pocket and you don't know about it. That way of not knowing. Once you put your knowing to it, you will know, and it will no longer be there. I was thinking earlier on, this ego thing has turned up earlier as eradication of self in Alan Watts. And it's so clumsy, it's so crude, there's hardly any expressions for it. And since he doesn't go into the objective side, it's so far from what is it about. It is not like the subjective side is completely simple and easy. I think his suggestions for how to go about to sort of easen up the constraints of the ego / objects, it's nothing less than throwing in a hand grenade in a football field and hoping out of this will come out a fantastic David statue, something similar. Or, well, how about those surgeons that lobotomized people once upon a time? They just pulled a big ice pick, it was literally an ice pick, that's what they used, into the brain, and they turn and twist it. Alan Watts' method and Suzuki, Deshimaro et al., it's so crude, they are just attacking somewhere and they don't know what they're doing. It's an idea of this is completely uncomplicated, and just do the gesture, just go through the movement. It's a little bit like that sketch with Susan Reuter and what's the other chap's name? Don't involve me in our relationships, he said. Copycat guys, but they don't even try to get it right. They're not even interested in these things. They never turned inwards at any stake in life, but they are keenly interested in the publicity and there being something mystical, oriental, or whatever it could be. I'm lacking explanations, but it's stupendous. This is also the place where localization is established. The ego and now together makes a specific point in the x, y, z. So here is time or now, and there you have x, y, z, 2, 4, 3, or something similar. That happens directly simultaneous, as well as all the other stuff. And that is the birth also of a world at large, or a perspective from nowhere. It is actually not a perspective from nowhere, but it's an unknowing in the origo that is the point consciousness that is supposedly not fractal. something I believed until very recently, until a couple of weeks ago actually. Misunderstanding, or lack of knowledge, which I myself suffered for at least 14 years. 16, I'm not even counting all the years of confusion. This establishment blocks out knowledge because it's a knowledge blocker. Not only that, what also happens is the objects become superficial. We don't go into the objects, and that is similar to that the objects is nothing for us. And think about it. That is absolutely ludicrous. Think about primitive man. Everything he had around him, he responded to that, he related to that. Every plant had a name that he was in contact with. All the instruments that he used, the tools, he knew them by heart, might have even constructed them. So an object in general without a depth, that is a modern conception. Yes, of course there have been roots to this development in early antiquity, but it wouldn't be possible when people still made their own tools. But today we can look around and think to ourselves, those are just objects. Objects for what, should be the question. Why are these objects in existence? Rather than the other question, what they are. What's their shape? What's their height? What's their color? What's their weight? And all of a sudden, you have a Newtonian universe out there somewhere. And isn't that a world at large? A world that escaped us somehow. Do you see the connections here to the ego? That is, it is actually doing half the work somehow. And I would say the ego could be an even better point to enter into this construct or relationship or bit of own unknowingness, because they also see some of the motives for this being upheld. The reason is, when you don't have knowledge, when you block things out and you have this bland situation of life that Plato describes so well, then you get a lack. And when the lack comes, you get a supplement. And as modern man takes supplementary nutritions to add to their already healthy diet, or adding drugs to their empty lives, philosophers cling even harder to the cause of the problem, nowness. Nowness becomes this fountain of richness, of color, presencing, purity, originality, or origin, naturalness. That is the place they want to be. But this is much worse than a mirage, because they are themselves constructing it. And for every time they strive harder for presence, the more they lose. And this loss is never conscious, never ever conscious. So the start of the turn of this is making the very loss conscious. And that is done by comparison. Watch your awareness. And also watch whenever space disappears around you. and the needle becomes even more needle-like, smaller, less encompassing, less in the presencing, and you literally feel space disappear a bit. It is by observing these differences you find the first clue, the first sort of challenge to the idea of a world at lost and an ego as this point looking at the world. Point without extension, point without depth. Because according to the logic of the ego and the object, these differences shouldn't be there. Should always be the same. No matter how it is, it should still be the same. During the day, during each moment. But what you will notice, it is constantly changing. And this is the very randomness of the focal setting. This is where in the interface, as Susie Frobel called it, we call this the body map, this time, body map, and where you make the cut between what is endogenous and exogenous. I won't write the whole exogenous. You do the cut randomly, without thinking, and you do it before you enter the presencing. And this thing goes the same way with time and space. In time, absence and especially, I would say, the past is especially distasteful to the lure, the passion of the presencing. Past is so discarded. Don't dwell into the past. Don't stay in the past. Also, the future is for the logocentric, something that Rodolphe Gachet pointed out. To the logocentric inclined ego, the future is always worry, and it takes it away from the full presencing of this glorious, fantastic presence. I would like to illustrate the presence with this shining thing. It shines and it lures you and it entices you. It says to you, here is the full presence. Here is the real original. This is not a copy. This is only truth. A truth without a hint of falsehood. Pure presence. But the closer you get, you might see fractality. And then you try to find your perfection somewhere else. But the fractality is the good thing. This is what you really need. But you shy away like a baby suffering from colic, whatever that is called. Refuses to take food, alimentation, because of tummy ache. You get so inclined, so used to the same thing, so you accept your really meager ration. It's like you only have instant coffee and you get used to it, and in the end you prefer it. Because this is habit. And habit, I would say, plays a huge role here. Because what upheld it's habit. And you start thinking any other way of being is an absolute impossibility. It's not within reach. That this random cut between your interface, your body map, and what's exogenous, let's say it's done there. That random thing is so true because it is random. It's pure chance. And the world should be pure chance. That pure chance is determinism. And determinism that is, of course, impossible to predict. Its results cannot be predicted. And this whole thing makes up a locking worldview from all directions at the very same time. Proofs are coming from everywhere. They are circular, but they are circular in an intricate manner, which enforces the idea of the reality in the presence. It's very, very locked. It's very hard to find one's way out of it. But one good way is notice the differences. They're not supposed to be there. Next step would be that you can influence the move, the fluctuation of awareness that goes over the day. Once you've done that, I think there's no risk you'll be turning back to the lure, the enticement of full presence. It will no longer have the same temptation to you and to your system. You will see it for what it is, completely random, and it leaves you isolated with very little knowledge, and a knowledge that at best can feed very little. It's like having just a spoonful of food every day instead of an incredible wealth that the world actually gives. And it's also a matter, maybe that's the third step, to giving up this boring, shady existence. That has its lure in itself. It gives some weird promises. You don't have to put any effort to anything. It also tricks you into thinking it's no good anyway, because this is how the world is and we can't change it. All those things sweeps in. So together with this positivism and hopefulness by the presencing, there is also a discouragement and the shared feeling of giving up somewhere. This is how things are and nothing can be changed. You've been striving such a long time for this presencing and you never get it. So you give up somewhere. And if it's not here, where should it be? You start thinking. And of course, this is often the reason why people jump on these incredibly simple solutions. The idea of getting into the full presence, it's very easy in a way. Maybe that's part of the temptation. Everyone can do it. Just step into full presence. Be here, be now. Don't care about anything else. Give up 99.99999% of everything that's presenting itself. While heck, most of the time in the universe is past and future. I'm more than willing to give that up, this shrapnel, this very, very shekel-like thing, and just stay there and have nothing of the space in the universe and nothing of the time, and not a thing of knowledge. And having that as one's outmost goal, what could go right? Sorry for the joke. What could go right with such a joke? No, that is a horrible goal. But it has been established such a long time ago. It's so ingrained, and we become oblivious it's just part of the Western world because we have no idea it's limited to us. That becomes an impossibility because we conquer everything. And I think a good example here is actually the Human Declaration of Rights, or the Declaration of Human Rights. It is the UN Day today, or is it tomorrow? I forgot. It's usually Google who tells me those things. The Declaration of Human Rights is an absolutely Western product, but still it was supposed to be for all nations of the world. This tendency makes us oblivious that there are actually people not far from us who has no idea about these limitations, couldn't even understand them, even less learn them. And that is a chasm that is very hard to understand. How could it be such differences? It's the same planet. But once more, it's the ego. The ego takes all the abundance of difference, qualities, depths, fragrances, tonalities, and for the ego everything is just the same. And in this sameness, the only thing you can establish are polarities. But the polarities in this level gives us very little information. They are also made by measures that at best can be called completely random. And therefore, they don't inform our actions, our thinking, or our planning. It doesn't give us knowledge about the world, of ourselves, and how to live our lives. And I think maybe the most devastating thing with this suction of the presence, it takes away all predicting power of your own life. You have to live your life ruled by factors which are out of your control completely. So you have to trust the ego to invent proxies in a proxy world where you imagine to have control. And this is the message I mentioned in the previous lecture, 890, the idea of Ben Ariely, shows that all our decisions today are completely irrational. It doesn't serve us or help our lives. Instead, they diminish. And for every time something is diminished, the ego will come in and say, that is just, that is normal. Because the ego protects itself. It's called cognitive dissonance in psychology, and it means the worse it gets, the more the ego shouts, everything is okay. I'm happy with this. I am smiling. It's the ego talking. Okay, I will terminate that, and I say thank you very much to listen to my third deconstruction I made myself. I hope you could enjoy it to some level, and I see you tomorrow. Bye bye.